Hello, good afternoon. My name is Abhinandan and I'm the coordinator of the Center for Policy Research, in addition to which I also chair the Materials Engineering Department. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this afternoon's lecture by Dr. Devasmita Chakraverty on this interesting topic that I had very little knowledge about until a few years ago. And recently I saw an article by a student, ex-student from I think one of the biological sciences departments, an article about this, and somebody tweeted about it, so I went and looked at it and so on. And then we got into a conversation about some other meeting to which we were inviting Deva, and at that time I learned that she had also worked on this, and therefore I asked her to come and give a lecture on this topic. That she worked on in her previous avatar before she joined IIM-Ahmedabad. So we will get a chance to learn more about her work, but just a quick introduction. She had her basic education, BSc and MSc, back in Kolkata before moving to the US, and she has a master's in toxicology, I think. But then her interests shifted, and eventually she ended up getting a PhD in higher education, in science education from the University of Virginia. And then she moved to Germany for a postdoc, and I think she then returned to the US to take up a faculty position at Washington State University. And I think that's when this work also took place. And so about a year ago, she moved back to India, and she is now a faculty member in higher education in the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad. So we are very pleased to have Devasmita with us, and so I now request her to give the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can use that. Can everyone hear me? Yes. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. No, really, thank you so much, because I think the hardest class to teach or the hardest lecture is the one right after lunch, right? You've had a full meal, blood sugar level high, and you know how it goes. So I'll try my best that you all don't fall asleep. I'll try to make it as interactive as possible. And typically what I do is, if you have pen and paper and if you want to just jot down some free-flowing notes, it's not compulsory. I'm not making you work hard so that you stay awake. But typically what people find a lot of value in is, I'm talking about my research and there are some thoughts that you get. You pen them down, and if it's okay with you, it's completely up to you, then you leave that paper with me so that later I can go back and see what you were thinking. I mean, typically not everyone gets a chance to talk, or not everyone is comfortable with a question. If that is what you want, we can do that. It's very interactive. So if you have a question or if you want to talk a little bit about something, just interrupt me. You don't have to wait till the end, you know. So just ask me any questions that you have, anything that you want to, because I'm afraid I might not fall asleep. I have had a good lunch. So I'll just, you make sure that I'm awake, I'll make sure that you're awake. How about it? Sounds good? All right. How many of you have never heard of the term imposter syndrome? Never. Okay, thank you even more for being here, because you've never heard of it, but you're curious about it, to learn more about it. In fact, I mean, you know, other than my introduction, good, I don't have to talk about myself. But how did I get interested in it? In fact, I formally started this work in 2017, but I got to know about this term in the year 2012. I was a final year PhD student in science education. With my background in science, I did science education because I was interested to learn more about people who do science. That is how I shifted from science to education. And for my PhD thesis, I was interviewing a lot of doctors, physicians. I was also interviewing a lot of people who got their PhD in biomedical science and engineering for a totally different topic. And some of them said that they feel like an imposter. And I had no idea what that means. And so I went back and I started reading about it. This is in the year 2012. I hope the lighting and everything, you can see everything clearly, right? Yeah. So I started reading about it, and what fascinated me is that we put so much effort into getting people in science fields, interested in science fields. But here is a group of very successful people who are already in the field. We don't have to get them interested, but they still do not believe in themselves. And I'll explain to you what is the imposter syndrome. I'll talk a little more about it. But there are groups of people who are actually very successful. They can be students, they can be postdocs, they can be anyone, but they still feel like it. So that is what got me interested, that it's an odd problem. If you are successful, then why should you doubt yourself? But that is exactly what happens here. All right, so today we'll talk about the imposter syndrome through very specific experiences. I didn't want to make this boring, so I didn't get a whole lot into the literature review, what people have said, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I can talk all about it. But I won't be spending a whole lot of time in how, what the theory says and what's happened. I'll give you some background, but I'll talk more in terms of people's experiences, because I think the most interesting form of sharing what one knows is through stories. And I have hundreds of stories of people who have felt like imposters. But before we share those stories, let's unsyndrome the word. And what do I mean by let's unsyndrome the word? What's wrong with the word syndrome? Any idea what's wrong with the word syndrome? Just a guess? Illness? It's a medical diagnosis. It's often a stigmatized word. And remember, I'm an education researcher. I'm not a psychiatrist, that I'm not diagnosing people. What I'm looking at is the phenomenon, the process, the why and the how. But I'm not diagnosing whether someone has the imposter syndrome or doesn't have the imposter syndrome. However, the word syndrome is very popularly used in media. In fact, there are many celebrities, Michelle Obama, Sheryl Sandberg, and even men. It's not just women, but even men have talked about, they have written about the imposter syndrome. So the word imposter syndrome is more popular in media, but for research purpose, I always use the word phenomenon because I'm interested in the phenomenon. So does that make sense? We can even get more creative, and some people call it imposter feelings, some people call it imposterism. We can use any word that we want to, but I'll not use the word syndrome. All right, so today we'll talk about mostly three things. What is it? What exactly is the imposter phenomenon? We'll also talk about what does the research show, the research that I have done, and we'll end on a happier note. That is it something that people are stuck to all their life like baggage, or can people work on it? We'll also talk of some of that. All good so far? All right. So, what does the voice say? What does the inner voice say? And some of you might relate to some of these, some of you may not. But if you have interesting voices to add, please feel free to do that. All right. So, I'll just read them out. When I was offered an internship at Google, I couldn't believe it and felt I just got lucky. I feel that I'm invisible. I shouldn't be here, and my advisor regrets having me in her lab. These are different people, by the way. I honestly do not apply for anything because I don't think I deserve it. I'm waiting for myself to finally start failing. I'm terrified that I don't belong in the PhD program, that my acceptance was a disastrous mistake, and that I should be cast out without another thought. You don't have to raise your hands, but I see some smiles. So I think some of you might have related to some of these insecurities at some point. No? There we go. So what exactly, in very basic terms, what exactly is the imposter phenomenon? This is what the imposter phenomenon is. I'll tell you what it is. Let's say I experience the imposter phenomenon. It means that when you succeed because of your own merit. When you fail because of your bad luck. But I'm feeling like an imposter, right? So if I succeed by mistake, then that is because, I'm sorry for the small font, but that is because of luck. That's because of God. That's because of my mentor and advisor. That's because of others, my parents, my neighbor, my dog, my cat. It's because of pretense, I'm pretending. It's because I'm lying, I've lied in my application. That's what I feel. It's because of her mistakes, of others' mistakes. Someone else made a mistake in choosing me in the program at IISc. It's because of misjudgment. It's because of connections. I have connections. My advisor has connections. It has got nothing to do with me. But if I fail, it's because of my fault. So does it make sense, this slide? This is very simply put. If you succeed, it's because you are good. If I succeed, it's because I'm lucky. That is exactly what the imposter phenomenon is. All right? Okay. So what's so bad about it? Like I said, it's a transient voice. It comes and goes. Thank God it doesn't stay all the time. But it's a constant chatter in the head. It's an inner monologue. It impacts thoughts and beliefs, not about ourselves, but also about what we can do, what we can achieve. This is a very important point. It thrives off the fear of success. It's typically followed. I mean, it's not followed by success, but immediately after success, the voice gets very high. For those who experience it, not everyone experiences it. Also, it manifests in sometimes subtle ways. Yes. Fear of success. I just got a grant. I just got a paper published in Science. And since I did, I think I'm an imposter. You as a reviewer did not understand the science I was writing about. So it's not that I'm good. It's that you are a fool. You don't understand what I have done. Yeah.
How different this is from internal locus of control and external locus of control?
They are related. There's research that shows they are somewhat related, but they are not entirely the same thing. Okay, all right, thank you. It's very persistent. It will stay on with you unless you do something about it. It's also an inability to separate fact from fiction. You know, the fact is I am successful. The fictional voice says that something is wrong. And somehow people cannot distinguish that this is true and this is not true. All right, makes sense till now? All right. Now, what's the problem? Maybe some of you will say, maybe I'm humble. That's why I say my success is because of God. What is the problem with that, right? There's no harm in being humble. There's no harm in experiencing it. In fact, some of us at some point of time have all experienced it. There's no problem with that. The problem is when it becomes self-limiting, when it becomes self-handicapping. In what ways can it happen? And there are thousands of ways that it can happen. Think about the situation, you've written a manuscript and for the last 4 months, you're reading it and just changing a word here and there, adding a comma, adding a full stop. But you're not submitting it because you're scared that the moment you do, people will learn about your lack of intellect. You're not willing to pursue newer areas of research because you think that you're not worth it. No one will believe you. You're not applying for awards that require self-nomination because you don't think you deserve it, right? You're playing it safe. You're saying yes to everyone. Anyone that gives you work, you say yes. That is where it becomes self-handicapping, when it is limiting you in some way. Can you think of any other ways that it could be limiting something that happens? And there are many things that can happen. Okay, we'll talk about those things as we go along. The silence is very scary actually. Either people are not listening or people are very intently listening and focusing. Either way, it's very scary. Seriously. All right. So, I started reading up about it. I got fascinated. I already had a background in science. my PhD was focusing on people in medicine. So I thought, why don't we look at what happens with people specifically in science, technology, engineering, math, that we call STEM, and also medicine. So that is how I came up with the boundary of my sample, that who am I going to study if I were to design this study. Makes sense till now? What I saw is, before I go into this a little bit, what I saw is this phenomenon was first termed, the term was coined in 1978 by two people, two psychiatrists, Dr. Clance and Dr. IIM-A. They were interviewing a lot of successful women. They didn't know about this term. And in the process of talking to people, this is exactly they found, that successful women are hesitating. They think that their success is not because of them, it's because of something else. And that is how in 1978, they came up with the term. It was initially discovered while talking to women, but this is not a women's issue. Men face it as well. So 1978, then in the 1980s, two people came up with validated scales. Clance was one of them. It's called the CIPS, Clance Impostor Phenomenon Scale. And then Dr. Harvey came up with Harvey Impostor Phenomenon Scale. I'll talk about those scales. What I found was from 1978 to the time when I started doing it, 90% of the studies were quantitative, correlational quantitative studies, mostly done in the US and Canada, maybe one or two in Korea, one in Germany, but mostly done in the US. Now, there's nothing wrong about quantitative studies. You know, correlational, you're trying to find variables, it's related to stress, it's related to personality types, all that is fine. But I was very interested in the stories of people. What's happening? How are they talking about it? And those stories don't come out when you just focus on quantitative research. So that is how I thought I'll take the best of both the worlds. So what I did is I designed a sequential mixed method study. It's very simple. As the name says, it's sequential. So there's a quantitative phase to the study where all those who are interested will take a survey. The survey has all their demographic information. It has items from the two scales, the CIPS and the HIPS. And the survey also had an open-ended response about an example when someone has felt like an imposter. Why did I do that? Because it's important for me to separate out people who feel like imposters versus people who don't, but they are impostering themselves into the study. You'll be surprised, 10% of people actually wrote that I don't feel like it, but I'm doing this study because I'm interested to learn more. And it's great that people want to learn more, but that's not the sample that I'm looking at. So giving a survey helped me filter out those people who were not eligible for the study. After the survey, if people wanted, they could participate in an interview. It was completely voluntary. If they said yes, then I personally contacted them over phone and I did an interview with them, which was about 30 to 45 minutes, but sometimes it went on as long as 90 minutes. We're talking of very hard, vulnerable experiences of people. People have cried, people have bared their hearts, and that was the beauty of the interviews, where people could talk about what exactly has happened. Whom did I include in the study? Anyone from a STEM or medicine background who was either a PhD student or postdoc or faculty or researcher or a doctor. Why not before PhD? Because for two reasons. There was some research that shows that it particularly the phenomenon starts to peak at the beginning of PhD. Why? Because if you think about your education, typically undergraduate and master's level, you are given what you need to study. You study it, you write an exam. But independent thinking, or that, getting into the territory of not knowing, that doesn't happen as much before the PhD. There's something about PhD training that triggers. The the fear of not knowing. That was one reason. Also, you have to limit it somehow. Sometimes people feel like it, but they don't have the vocabulary, so they can't explain it enough, which is why I think that is why how I decided to restrict it to this particular group. I used a purposeful and snowball sampling. I use social media like anything. I put up posters of the study shared on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and once people started seeing the study, they also shared it. In a period of 13 months, I got 930 completed surveys, fully completed surveys, and among them I just spent 13 months talking to people, and I was able to interview about 420 participants. So today we'll talk of some of the experiences that's happening mostly among the PhD students and the postdocs. Any questions so far? Yes? No, faculty are there, but not for today. Not for today. Yeah. Yeah.
Did they feel that the success is short-lived?
Success is short-lived.
Was there a fear that they thought that the success would be a short-lived success?
In a way, yes. So some of them said that my paper, let's say this is an example, that my paper was accepted in a very good journal, but if I had to do the experiment again, I will not get those findings and this will never happen. I will never get the success. So that way they felt they can't replicate an achievement. Any other questions? Yes?
So the phenomenon is not restricted to STEM, right? It
No.
happens. Okay.
No, it's not restricted to STEM, but my interest is in what's going on in STEM so that we can improve training in STEM, we can improve the conversations kind of that are happening. That is why I restricted myself to STEM.
You said back in 1978, so
Yeah.
somebody came up with this term.
Yeah.
Because they were psychiatrists, they came up with this term called impostor. Did they call it impostor syndrome?
No, they called it Impostor Phenomenon. Yeah, in fact I emailed them and that is what they told me, to use the term.
When did it become a syndrome? And if it is a psychiatric term,
Yeah.
then I mean, did people think about creating some treatment protocol or some such thing?
So extreme cases have been linked to,
Psychiatric disease, is it?
to some extent yes, for those, but not everyone. So it's not a binary yes or no, it's across a spectrum. And there is research that has linked it to neuroticism and the extreme levels of imposter syndrome. But the people who coined the term, I think at some point media picked up the term and made it into syndrome, but also people who study syndrome just study the syndrome part of it. But we as researchers, we don't study, but yes, to answer your question, yes, it has been done, and there have been correlations with extreme, lack of sleep, mental disturbances, suicidal ideations, those kind of things. All right. So the structure of the study is more or less clear. Why did I do what I did? That is clear to you. Okay, I'll talk mostly about the interviews that I did and some of the findings. Data analysis is still in progress, but I'll just share some of the findings that we have. All right. The study was open to people of all genders, but 85% of those who participated were women. That way you can call it a bias sample, or you can say that maybe women experience it more, but men also experience it. It was a self-selected sample. Age ranges, I was very surprised, people all the way from their 20s to their 70s, and people in their 70s actually said how they are still feeling like an imposter. Not that going back in the past and saying I felt like an imposter. So even people in their 70s talked about it. I mean the nature of it was different, and I'll tell you how it was different. But 75% of the sample actually was people in 20s and 30s. That's also, the time of PhD training, postdoctoral training, finding yourself career-wise, who you are, who your identity is, what your identity is, those kind of things. More than 200 institutions, more than 80 departments in STEM and medicine. This particular work was done in the US. I'm in the process of expanding this work in India. There's been pockets of work that has been done in India, like maybe 2 or 3 studies, one among medical interns, but it hasn't been done at a large level. So one finding was that there's a particular demography of people who self-selected themselves into the study. I'm not making any kind of claims about the fact that women face it more than men, but this is the nature of the sample. All right, so what does it mean when I talk about I feel like an imposter? And this is the data that I'm still analyzing. So I actually ask people, what does it mean to you to feel like an imposter? And there might be other kind of constructs that come up. But so far I've seen largely 3 things. Lack of belonging, the fear of being found out, and attributing your success to someone else. And I'll read out these quotes. Maybe you could relate to what exactly I'm talking. I am a published author in the journal Science, and this is a 4th year PhD student. And I still feel like I was given authorship as a courtesy, not because I did any work to belong on that list. I sometimes wonder if they were just being nice to me. So when we talk of lack of belonging, it can mean many things. It can mean lack of belonging in STEM itself, in science itself. It can mean lack of belonging in the department. It can mean lack of belonging in your advisors group. It can also mean lack of belonging in the journal list. It can be at the macro level, it can be at the micro level, but it's very much there. I mean, you know, I wouldn't be able to sleep if I had a paper in science, even at this stage. And someone, a PhD student who gets it and still thinks that it was just given because someone was being nice. I would love to find those people who were being nice. Maybe they can be nice to me. All right. Now, looking at the second one, I honestly feel like I tricked my entire committee into passing me. I love this. You know, how can you trick an entire committee, right? And that I must have fooled everyone during the interview and throughout the coursework. This is the kind of thought process that was going on. And this person knows it is not true. They are not divorced from reality. But this voice is very loud in their head. And what happens as a result, you will be amazed. Someone got into Stanford University but didn't go to Stanford, went to a much lower ranked school because they thought that they will be found out. My advisor somehow chose incorrectly, or maybe she just needed to have another student for her tenure application, and maybe I was the only one that applied. I see some smiles, some nods. What are you thinking? Some of those securities rings a bell? Yes. 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 Because of the imposter phenomenon. Because that is what they experience, and they know it's not true, but they hold on to it as long as they can. And after a while, it becomes self-limiting. Yes. It's both, and I'll actually cover that slide. So I'll tell you more about that. Yes. It cannot be. You know why? Because in that survey, I also asked them to list an achievement. The core definition of imposter phenomenon is you feel like it despite you being successful. So people had to list out at least one achievement. I mean, how do you think it can be true that so many people are getting fooled, right? This person has a paper in science. Some people, there's one person who had severe brain damage after an accident but could still complete their PhD. A person fought breast cancer but still had those achievements. So people are actually overcoming their circumstances and still being very successful. I mean, the fact that they are all PhD students means they are successful at some level. That is what got them into the PhD program and even further up, right? All right. So now, so far what we know that mostly women participated, but also some men. So far we know people across all ages feel it. Now I'll talk about particular findings out of interviewing 90 PhD students, and what did they talk about, how it manifests. I mean, fine, I have imposter phenomenon, so what? How is it manifesting for me? And I found 5 themes. In qualitative analysis, finding out themes is common practice. Number 1 is I'm scared of progress and public recognition. So the further along I go in the program, I finish my qualifiers, I finish my comprehensive exams, the more I get that feeling. The second one is what you just said, that I tend to compare myself with others. And I'll give you examples of all these. I'm scared of public speaking and scientific writing. I mean, PhD, hello, you have to talk, you have to publish research. I'm reluctant to apply new knowledge, which is the whole point of doing a PhD or being in academia. And I do not ask for help. Let me tell you how each of them has manifested. And I'm just showing you one quote out of many, many quotes. There can be a number of manifestations, but maybe this will make sense to you. I don't feel that I deserve to pass the qualifiers and I feel terrified. So this person has already passed the qualifiers. Each thing that I do right by program standards makes me feel like I'm one step closer to the edge of the cliff. I will get shoved off when they figured out I'm really not smart enough or cut out for this position. This is what I was saying, that this happens despite the success and not because of lack of success. Comparing yourself with others. I didn't realize how fragile my own self-esteem was until I was directly surrounded by so many people I could compare myself to. I don't ask good questions, I don't think critically, I don't take myself seriously, I don't speak, act or think like a scientist. My proposal was shit compared to others. Everyone else had better questions and knew what they were doing. I don't. This is an internal monologue, but this person who doesn't know me feels safe enough to share this monologue with me. And why I find this problematic is how it might be impacting the person. Are they not networking as much as they should? Are they not talking out as much as they should? There are different things that could be happening. All right, moving on. Public speaking, scientific writing, both are very important means of communication, not only for PhD students, for postdocs, for faculty. People are going to somehow sniff out that I'm actually not as knowledgeable as you would think I am. That's one of my major sources of anxiety. I don't present at as many conferences. This person doesn't go to conferences. I really don't like to hang around my poster because I'm stressed about who's gonna come and talk to me about it. My advisor will scrutinize the paper carefully, and he'll catch any little mistake, and then that little mistake would blow up into the realization that I don't know what I'm talking about, and the next day I'll be kicked out of the lab. So these stories are very vivid. The imagination is quite vivid. Yes?
Looking through these points, I feel that many of these manifestations can be there even in a case when the person is not having an imposter syndrome.
That is true.
Depending upon the phase in which you are, as a student, I have gone through many of these phases that I thought things. But then where do you draw a line that this is imposter syndrome?
That is why the survey had questions on imposter syndrome. There were scales where they answered questions on that. So in a way, I selected people only who are experiencing it. That is where the survey was important. Even before the interview happened, they had to fill out a questionnaire with all the questions. It was a Likert scale 1 to 5 and 1 to 7, the two different scales.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it could be a state-specific feeling as well, right?
It could be.
If you're at a bad time of your PhD or postdoc or even...
Yeah, and they're not mutually exclusive, is what I'm saying. Because when I computed the scores they did fall under the high to intense category of feeling like an imposter. Now, if you ask me about the quality of scale, I think it could be better. But it has been widely used since the 70s and no new scale has come up. It's a good scale, but I think given the new reality of academics, it could be made better. But they did have a high to intense imposter score in the survey itself, and that is why I interviewed them. All right. Huh?
Percentage of students experience.
That's a great question, and it's hard to answer because most of the studies have been done either across one institution, many students across one institution, or many students across few institutions, but a national level study has not been done. In medicine, they'll typically say 35 to 50% of residents and around that percentage of doctors, but these are all studies done as islands. There's no general study that can tell you that 50% of people experience it. And also remember, it's not a binary yes or no. There's a scale to how much people. So that work hasn't been done. Okay. So again, talking of lots of quotes, I'll tell you, the core of it. I think every course I take is new and different and challenging in different ways. Every single time, I think this will be the class that breaks the camel's back and reveals all the things that I cannot do, and my ambitions for a future will end with this course. See, the core is that, the core of this idea is you could be taking a new class, learning everything new, and look at it as a great opportunity that you are learning something new. In this case, that newness scares these people. Every time they do something new, they feel now people will get to know that I am the real imposter. That never happens, but that fear is always there. And similarly, in this last example, this person could not solve a coding problem in a long time, and an expert came and did it in like 10 minutes. And that is what happens, and that is why we collaborate, because I know something well, you know something well, you know something well. That is why we work together as teams. So instead of seeing this as something like that, this person thinks that, oh, he could do it in 10 minutes, I couldn't do it in 6 months, so something is wrong with me and I should hide and I should leave the program. Now, moving on, so this makes sense? Yeah. 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 So her question is it transient or does the voice stay? It can be improved a lot if there is intervention. But again, formal studies have not been done. And this is why right before PhD orientations, now departments will actually make you go through a training program telling you what you should do if you see these signs. It may be transient, it may not be transient. In fact, I will cover this in a later slide. I'll talk about it then.
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
So you have interviewed wide section of students, all coming from different backgrounds, like you said, from different institutes or different courses, and so this is like something. This is like common ground that you found. So do you think there are some reasons that are actually contributing for this to actually start? I mean, there should be some trigger, right, inducing the phenomenon. So why so many students face it?
And you guys really ask good questions. Yeah, you're right, exactly. What I'm presenting to you is a slice of the cake. And I'm just showing you what they're feeling in their training. But I've asked them about their family background. I've asked them about their history of childhood growing up. There are many different things that could be triggering it. Even something like growing up in a household where people witness domestic violence. So there could be a number of things going on that translates into feeling like this in academia. Many things that could be happening. But I'm not covering it here because then we'll just go on and on and on. All right. So this is what I found among the PhD students, again, not generalizable data. There could be more themes. If you did a study tomorrow in ISC, you might come up with new themes, which is what should be. But when I asked the postdocs, 43 postdocs, I won't go into a lot of detail, but what I found is the ones in red were all the common themes that the PhD students had already said. That once again, they're scared of pursuing anything new. They have a hard time asking for help, networking, asking questions. Again, writing and communicating is a big hurdle for them. I've just started to analyze faculty data, and I've already found a common theme, common among postdocs and PhD students. Can you guess which theme that would be? Last one? What is the last one? Like number 5 or number 3? Number 5. But 5 is not common to PhD. Only the red ones are common with the PhD. It's actually number 3. Again, when faculty are talking, some faculty, not all faculty, talking at conferences and especially publishing papers, the same kind of fears remain for those who feel like imposters. But I've just started analyzing the data, so I don't know what else I'll find. What came up new is, this was interesting. I do not apply because I am unable to visualize myself as faculty. Now think about it, you are a postdoc, you spend multiple years training in this exact field where your aim was to become faculty. And now you're not even applying because you can't visualize yourself being faculty. So that's a huge limitation. I think that's a huge limitation. The other one is I procrastinate and experience mental health issues, and I'll talk a little more in detail about the ones that were not common. If I were to transition to a research intensive university and really strong department, I would just flop. I don't have the same training that the other people in the labs do. Again, self-comparison. I wouldn't be as productive as the other postdocs, wouldn't be able to compete. It's prevented me from leaving. Leaving what? Leaving the current postdoc position. Being where I am right now is detrimental to my long-term career success, yet I'm afraid to take that next step because I just don't necessarily feel like I belong there. So this person is very aware that being in that position is detrimental. After a point, how long do you want to train as a postdoc? But this person can't move to the next step. Similarly, this postdoc thinks that if you think of an imposter as also potentially thinking that my questions may not be the correct questions or the experiment might not show a difference, those feelings lend towards a tendency to procrastinate in starting an experiment. So this person is afraid to even start a new experiment. All right. So one of the things that I found, and this is only one of the many things, is workplace harassment has played some role in some people feeling like an imposter. What kind of workplace harassment? It can be sexual harassment. It can be gender harassment, harassment based on your gender. It can be unwanted sexual attention. It can be sexual coercion. It can be gender bias. It can be microaggression. These all these terms have different definitions. What I found in this sample is that people who reported these are all women. I'm not saying it only happens to women, but only women talk to me about these things. Now, who were the perpetrators? The victims had the same demography. They were all women. They could be women PhD students, women postdocs, even women faculty. But the perpetrators had different demography. Who were they? They were typically older men and older women in power. So it's not just a man to woman kind of thing going on. It could be instructors making inappropriate sexual references in class, and I'll give you examples of all these. It could be a peer, someone who's closer to your age, or it could also be someone younger to you whom you are teaching. So it can happen in a wide range of situations. Now, Harassment is one thing, imposter phenomenon is one thing. What is the connection? It's not true that anyone who's harassed starts feeling like an imposter. These were the connections. What exactly happens? When someone is being harassed at work, that person tends to feel invisible. They feel they do not have a voice. They develop trust issues. They somehow internalize it and question their own competency. Not everyone, but those who feel like an imposter. They feel alienated and they internalize the disparaging comments. How? Women felt invisible when a women faculty was mistaken to be a student. A female student was mistaken to be a staff. There's nothing wrong in being staff. But look at this example. When you have been in the department for 3 years and a faculty in your department thinks you are the audiovisual person, or thinks you are the custodian, or you are the janitor, that's when I feel invisible, that I can't be seen in the department, and that's why I feel like an imposter. What about being voiceless? A lot of times in group meetings, a woman would present an idea and would be shut down, and a man would present the same idea and would get a pat on the back. In classrooms, sometimes a female student would ask a question and those questions would not be welcome. But male students would ask questions and the professor will make eye contact, will smile, and they'll say, oh, that's a great question, and then start answering that question. So these people felt they don't have a voice. So if I feel invisible, I don't have a voice, do I really belong? If I don't belong, maybe I am the imposter. That was the line of thinking. I'm still analyzing this data. This is not published, but hopefully in the future you'll read a paper that talks about these things. What else is going on? Trust issues, questioning competency, one's own competency. So a student wondered, I'm a survivor of sexual assault and it makes me feel like an imposter because I'm guarded, I'm not being authentic, or I'm always having to be more reserved, or I don't want to be viewed as a target. I overthink things based on people's cues. That factored into how I view my own ability. So somehow something going on externally gets internalized into this is my problem. What else? Alienation. So a research scientist, a postdoc, shared that she was so young, this happened during her undergraduate training, that she was so young when I experienced it and I didn't have a group of peers. I didn't know that these were things that I could talk about with people. I was alone in that situation. It still very much colors my feelings about how I got into science and sometimes whether I'm good enough to be here, because I was valued in a very different way during one of my very early scientific experiences. This feeling carries over. Something that you have experienced 10 years ago, 15 years ago, depending on how extreme it was, the triggers keep coming back even after all these years. What are you thinking? Are you shocked? Are you surprised? Or are you like, yes, I know, I have known people who have gone through this. How are you responding? It's uncomfortable talking about these things, but I'm glad that these people did. If we don't talk about it, then we won't be able to process it. Let's look at one more, which is internalizing disparaging comments. On turning down a lab mate, so a lab mate is someone your own age, who made romantic advances, he shifted gears and every time he would see me, he would talk to me about how I was eating so much and I better watch what I'm eating. Now, you might say this is cultural, this is a sign of care. Harassment is not always someone making a romantic advances. It could be someone commenting on the way you dress, someone telling you, hey, you are a postdoc, you are a scientist, why are you wearing heels? Why are you wearing nail polish? Why do you have a haircut? You should be wearing baggy jeans. It could be someone commenting on your body shape, body size, the way you talk, the way you dress. There's a whole range of things that could be going on. Even male students giving teacher evaluations, where to women they'll say, oh, you are so pretty and you are so feminine. It's got nothing to do with the way the professor teaches. The evaluation should be based on how they teach and not how they look. So these are some things that make people question, if they're already feeling like an imposter, that do I really belong here? So where are we? We are more than halfway done. Any comments? Anything? Yes.
Isn't that resonance in success? What is expected out of you and what you define as a success? Is there a resonance that's causing this?
See, when you talk of success in terms of what does it take to do in academia, everyone knows what success means, right? So that definition is very blurred. How is this related to success? These people are already successful. They are in the program.
No, what I'm saying is this is outside. The others feel that they are successful. And according to the benchmarks that you speak, like the academia has this kind of a benchmark for success.
Yeah.
And they are not, they are meeting those benchmarks. But internally, they don't think that is a success for them.
So what do they think what is success?
I mean, I'm asking, is it because they think something else is, something else makes them feel more successful than meeting the demands of this benchmarked success?
No, actually they're trying very hard to live up to the expectations of a successful profile. And typically in academia, what is a successful profile? An older male professor. So anything that deviates from that normal, just deviates from that normal. Yeah.
When you talked about this sort of value systems that people have to measure success by, right? These metrics. In my experience, when I felt like an imposter, it essentially came down to my value systems and how I measured my success by. Like my self-esteem relied on certain metrics, certain cues that I was getting not only from other people, mostly from other people, the way they treated me and all that. And I was measuring my success based on that.
Based on that.
In school, I was meeting those metrics head on. Like I was at the top of my little bubble all the time. Then my bubble expanded. I came here. I met with the creamy layer of pretty much all over the country. That was when the problem started. When I felt completely out of space.
Yes, and so many people have talked about the exact same thing.
And how I could get out of it, sort of, in the place I'm right now, is by changing the value systems that.
So how did you change? Could you quickly tell me one instance?
Sure. Let me think about it.
Please do. Yeah, I would love to hear what you did. And you know, one of the reasons I did interviews is because in the future these themes could become questionnaires for surveys, so that we can look at the prevalence of certain things happening. So these are not all the reasons that could be happening. There are many other reasons, but until I started interviewing these themes, in fact when I started the study I didn't even think that harassment would come up as an issue. It just came out, and there's exactly one paper published last year that quantitatively looked at sexual harassment and the impostor phenomenon. All right, so moving on, one other thing, in STEM, what are the characteristics of the fields where sexual harassment happens? I mean, it can happen at any level in all fields, but typically in fields where there's field work, marine biology, ecology, geology, where women have to be there in the field extended amount of time, that is where harassment happened a lot. Even things like comments like a woman can't drive a vehicle, a heavy vehicle. So a man thinks he needs to come and help her even drive a truck. Male majority specialties like engineering, computer science, math, physics, the kind of comments that women heard was, and these are actual comments that were made to them, which is, you are too pretty to be doing engineering, you have a boy's name, I thought I was hiring a man. The only reason that you will get the award is because you are female, because they like women engineers. It's scientifically proven that men are better at science and engineering than women. Well done, you don't look like a mathematician. So in all these instances, no one is actually sexually harassing, like groping someone or pushing someone. But words are potent, words are powerful. This was actually said by a very old and well-known math professor whom this girl met at a conference. And she said, I was so happy, it's like I met a celebrity and I went and I talked to him, and then this is what he said, that your talk was well done, you don't look like a mathematician. I mean, it's humorous, it's funny in a way that it's so on your face, but then when you step back and you think, oh my God, have I ever said these things to people? Or have I ever heard these things but didn't think it was wrong? Female majority fields are even more interesting. Like what? Like biology? Typically more women. What's going on there? See, students are more, but again, professors are typically male. A much older male professor, while teaching about plants, would give examples like pectin in plant cell walls by commenting, some of you girls who might do canning and make jams and preserves, why are you assuming that all women are making jams and pickles? Pejorative acronyms, and this was told to me by someone whose name is Lisa, were made about a discipline. For example, low input sustainable agriculture, or LISA, was used in class to make jokes about her, such as Lisa's kind of nice to explore, but Lisa won't make a very good farm wife. The professor was making these comments. In a pharmacology class, an instructor sat back in his chair and put his arms behind his head and had huge sweat stains in his armpit. He said, oh yeah, I published a paper a few years ago that showed male sweat actually is something that gets females going. Why would you say that in class or anywhere for that matter? Right? It's crazy, right? So we've talked of a number of things. We know by now that there are many PhD students who feel like imposters, postdocs feel like imposters, workplace harassment could be a big contributor. What the typical demography of people who felt like imposters? Typically women, typically the underrepresented minorities based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. If you are the only international student in class, you are underrepresented. Those who take a break, mostly women who take a break to have children and then come back, find it very hard. Sometimes because their own advisors, postdoc advisors, PhD advisors, even women advisors give them a hard time. Those who experience frequent transition, undergraduate to graduate, graduate to postgraduate, postgraduate to PhD, postdoc faculty. Another transition is, I also looked at the MD PhD dual degree program, where you become a medical doctor and a scientist. So when you move between the phases of MD to PhD, PhD to MD, any kind of transition would trigger the imposter phenomenon. Sorry, those who feel like they are the only one, the only woman in the group, something like the only one. Also those who experience workplace harassment. So some questions that I think we should be thinking about at this point, maybe you already did, is does it persist over time? Does it get better? And I want you to think about these questions a little harder. I have some vague ideas, I'm analyzing data, but I would like you to think about these questions a little more while we talk about it. Does it get better with age? Does it get worse with age? Does having a female advisor help? There are so many examples of male advisors harassing. Do men and women experience it similarly? Are these solely internal voices? These are not, these are internal voices, but they are very deep rooted in external cues. As you would see in all the examples, the cue came from an external source. What do you think? Does it persist over time? Does it get better or worse? Any guess? Any wild guesses? Typically. So, yes, absolutely. But it could go both ways. One set of people said, so I also asked them a question that, think about the time you first felt like an imposter. Did it get better or did it get worse? A lot of people said it gets better. A lot of people said it gets worse because with age comes new roles and responsibilities. I'm a postdoc, I'm a faculty. 10 years later, I'll be a full professor. I'll be a dean, I'll be a chair. I'll be taking on new roles and responsibilities. So if I'm already prone to feeling like an imposter, every time I get into a new role, that feeling triggers. So it can go both ways actually. Does having a female advisor help? Not at all. I have a lot of instances where female advisors were harassing and they wanted their students to be a certain way, typically very successful, not have children, not have babies, that kind of a profile. So it did not help. Do men and women experience it similarly? Let me tell you that my interpretation is based only on this study. So please don't make a generalization, but what I saw is men and women experience it, but for many men, it's typically short term. And the reason revolves around something that they can solve. I'll give you an example. A male PhD student felt like an imposter because they had not taken a particular class, a particular subject. They did not know it well. So they quickly took a few courses in that subject and then it got better. You know, you had a beer with your bro, with your best friend, you talked about it, you talked about the course, hey, I got an A, I got an A+, and it was gone. With women, it was more long term, and the reason for them feeling like an imposter was not something that they could easily solve. If your advisor thinks less of you, if someone is harassing you, you can't take a course and cure your imposter feelings, right? The environment has to change. Something on a larger scale has to change. That is where there's a fundamental qualitative difference between the way men feel like an imposter, where some of them actually were bragging about how they felt like an imposter and yo, I did it, I got rid of it. But for women, it's a completely different kind of a feeling. All right. Yeah, and these are internal voices, but the cues are very deep rooted in external things going on. So, any questions before we move on to the optimistic, nice phase of what can be done? Yes. Yes, please.
I think the trigger was when I came here.
Yeah.
So I had a very solid metric to measure my success by, which was my rank overall in this country. Like that's the metric all entrance exams use.
Yeah.
And I was doing good in that, and I felt good about it.
Yeah.
So it was a top of the crowd kind of metric.
Right.
But when I came here, the crowd shrank, and it was I was among very good people.
Everyone
and
was a topper.
I was suddenly average.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So first off, I was not doing good in my metric, and adding to that was the other facets of my identity. Like these people who are doing well by this metric, the toppers of the class, they acted and behaved a certain way which was not like what I did.
Yeah.
They were interested in Maxwell's equations and all that, and I was interested in dance.
Yeah.
So somehow my identity was wrong. So and this fed into the whole, I don't belong here because I'm not a person. Like, why would a person in a science institute be interested in dance?
Yeah.
And so I don't belong here. That's how it fed into. And I think a major part of how I got out of that was to change this metric of measuring my success from rank to what makes me happy. Like, if I'm doing something, if I'm in a place where I am functioning and I'm happy, that's the best. Like, I don't need to measure anything else. And for me to come to this realization took a lot of work.
Right.
But finally, that's how I came to.
You know, what you're sharing is so important, because if everyone talked about how they overcame it, then, I mean, sometimes people don't even have the vocabulary to explain how they are feeling. A lot of people have felt like it, but they didn't even know the term imposter phenomenon. So how do you work on something whose term you don't know? So, which is why I hope that these kind of instances keep coming up more. Thank you for.
I just want to add, therapy really helped.
Therapy help?
Yeah. So if like, and it gave me the vocabulary, like you
Yes,
said,
yeah.
like different theories of
Right.
how psychology works.
Right.
Just gave me some access to sort of some move, something. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So, in addition to what he said, that yes, therapy is really helpful. I mean, even talking to someone whom you trust, it doesn't have to be someone, you know, whom you don't know, but someone who you really trust. But also, what can be done? This is the first book actually that was ever written by Dr. Pauline Clance. I just read the book and I found it so enlightening, even in terms of clearing my thoughts. There are other books, there are many books that have been written. I'm not particularly recommending these two books, but I've seen that these two books have been particularly helpful. So if you want, you can read those and understand it a little bit more. What else? You can self-evaluate. In fact, these scales are available online, the two scales I talk about. You can see where you stand. And these are not perfect scales, but they will give you some idea about where you stand. Also again, collectively talk about the culture of academia and mental health issues, which might be happening but may not be happening in many places. We don't talk in everyday conversations. We don't talk about how we are feeling in a negative way or how we feel like we don't measure up. But when we normalize those conversations, and that is where I think we need the help of administrators, chairs and deans and professors to step in and create those kind of safe spaces where people can talk about it and not feel judged. Even, you know, during orientation, when people are just getting in to the institute, any place, if there's a small talk about this, not pointing that every one of you will feel like an imposter, but even giving them the arms, the kind of resources that if you feel like an imposter, you could self-diagnose by these signs and maybe you could do blah, blah and blah. Even those steps will go a long way, because most of these people, before talking to me in the interview, they had not talked to anyone. And here I was thanking them for spending an hour of their time giving me information for free. I didn't pay them anything, and they were thanking me for listening to them. And they said that before today, I had not talked about it, and as a result, I had not thought about it in an organized way. You are forced to think about it when you are forced to talk about it. So have those conversations. What else? Think of the way we talk about failure in academia. Has anyone heard of the CV of failures? You should look it up. It's very fascinating. Just Google it, CV of failures. Many people have done it now, but I think a Princeton University professor first did it, right? Right? They listed every time they failed. And trust me, if you were to do that, your CV of failures would be 10 times longer than your actual CV. Because you need to do things many times, right? Have you ever done it? I wonder, no? I mean, do it as an exercise, trust me. Yeah, exactly. Because we try at so many things. But you know, what is exactly failure? Is not getting a paper published failure, or is not even trying failure? When you don't even try, that is the real failure. I mean, you don't publish it this time, you will publish it in some ABC journal, who knows, the process is very random. I just published a paper which I was trying for the last 6 years, and after 5 rejects from different journals, this was after the 3rd revise and resubmit, I finally published a paper. Is it my failure or is it the system's failure? It is the system's failure, right? But I mean, this is not how we think of failure. You know, you don't get into IIT, oh, you are a failure. Oh, you didn't get into IIC, oh, you are a failure. No, if you don't even apply, that is where you are really failing. So we need to culturally change the way we talk about failures. Look up the CV of failure, it's very, very interesting. What else? There's a very popular term that is used. Has any one of you heard it? Fake it till you make it. I hate it. Because when you fake it, you are kind of rejecting the idea, right? Why do you have to fake it? If you feel like it, feel like it. More power to you. So own your feelings, own your insecurities, just make sure you don't internalize it. But you don't have to keep saying that I have to fake it. Why will you have to fake it? You are not faking being a scientist. Why have you got to fake it? Remember, it's not binary. The feeling is not binary. In fact, a person could feel like an imposter in academic writing, but totally not feel like an imposter in public speaking, in analyzing data, in doing any other part of their work. So you have to realize that there are no like true imposters who feel like an imposter in every aspect. Think about what you feel like an imposter in. I'm very nervous about public speaking. I don't know if you recognize it, but every time I have to talk on stage, I feel like an imposter and my blood pressure shoots up. But I know that my strength is my academic writing. When I'm writing, I'm calm, I'm composed. It's a nice world out there. So I know that when I'm on stage, I'm going to feel like an imposter. And that's why I consciously work on it. What else? See if it is protective or handicapping. A very small group of people actually said that it's a very protective feeling. It keeps you grounded, it keeps you humble, it doesn't let you feel, highly of yourself. But that was a very less small percentage of people. So see whether it's self-handicapping or if it's actually protecting you from thinking largely of yourselves. Every time you have a voice in the head, a fictitious voice, recognize it and ask yourself, can I change the narrative? You publish a paper, you think I'm an imposter, see if you can have a different dialogue in your head. Ask for feedback. This is especially true for students and postdocs. If you are writing something, if you are given a talk, ask for feedback so that you can actually improve on that and you're not waiting till the last moment. And ask for feedback multiple times. What else? Let go. Don't keep on doing something, writing a paper forever and ever. At some point, just let go. Anyway, you'll get a revise and resubmit, best case. Anyway, you have to change things. So just don't try to make things perfect. Just try to finish things. There's a lot of groups on social media now. If you look at Twitter and LinkedIn, connect with them and see what people are talking about. In fact, I have a Twitter handle where I collate and I share articles all the time. You are very welcome to connect with me. I actually got some business cards. If you want to stay in touch, please do. I would love that. What else? Yeah, one last thing. If you want to learn more about this, I have a podcast. I have a paper I published last year. This is the citation. So these are some of the other resources. This paper actually out of the PhD data just got accepted recently. So it will be out very soon. And just look for the term on Google Scholar and you'll just see so many papers that have been published on it. So this is some of the things that I wanted to share. Thanks so much for listening to it and I would love to hear some questions. Yes. Yeah.
All about successful imposters, phenomena, what about a person who has been seeing failure continuously, suddenly gets a success? Does he or she thinks that it's by chance that he or she has been successful? It's by chance that he's successful. Is that also an imposter phenomenon? It's being unsuccessful also, suddenly a success happens. So you're not able to believe that it's because of his or her own effort. And so can that person or that feeling also be called as an imposter syndrome or things like that?
Theoretically, yes. But do you think it's possible that someone has never succeeded in anything but suddenly gets into some position? That's hard, right?
Suppose somebody is done well, so they will start feeling that by chance will be in a position. By chance this has happened. Is that also an imposter syndrome?
It could be, but what do you think? I'm curious. That typically it doesn't happen that someone is, again, success and failure is a very socially constructed word. Who is successful? Someone who gets into IISc. And then what about someone who doesn't? I mean, this is my first time here. I have never dreamt that I would be here standing giving a talk. So again, it depends on how socially the terms success and failure are constructed. Some people take the IIT JEE 5 times and they don't clear it. But that doesn't mean they're failures. They just could not clear the exam, right? So that way it becomes tricky thinking about what exactly is success and what exactly is failure. But you know, everyone I interviewed have achieved something so far. That is why they got into a PhD program. So that way I would assume they have been successful in certain measures. I know it's not a very good answer to your question, but hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Is there some sort of common factor that predisposes some people to feeling?
No, it's, you know, it's so complicated. I mean, like I said, some people who experienced violence at home, they internalize like everything that's going wrong in the world is because of me. Because what they watched is my parents are fighting, so I think it's my fault. That could be one reason, you know, being harassed by someone in power at an early age, that could trigger it. So there are so many triggers that could be going on. It's very complicated to understand what exactly happened. Yes.
Yeah, you.
You could go to someone you trust to begin with. You could write down your feelings if you think you don't have anyone you could go to. You could read up a little bit. If you think it gets self-handicapping and if you trust your advisor, you could talk to your advisor. I'm not saying advisors would always, you know, not everyone knows about this topic. But I would start with writing down what exactly is bothering me, and then there's so many resources out there on social media, watching YouTube videos of what people are saying. That would be the first step. But if I think I need help, I need to go to a professional and talk, I would even do that. I have a question for all of you. If I were to do a study on this topic in India, what should I study? I mean, of course, imposter phenomenon is what I want to study. But what are the variables I could be looking at? What are the measures I could be looking at based on your experience? It's a hard question.
Experience in family.
Experience with family?
Yeah, I mean, you're always being compared to either your siblings or
Yes.
your friends.
Yeah.
And it's possible that the people around you keep putting you down and make you doubt yourself all the time.
Right.
It's a possibility, right?
Absolutely. In fact, there is some literature on sibling rivalry. And I asked a few people. Some people said when you are the older sibling, there's a lot of pressure on you. But when you are the younger sibling, there's again a lot of pressure on you.
I mean, most families now these days have just one kid, so that is not an issue. But parents comparing you with your friends,
yes, absolutely,
or your peers, is definitely an issue that you might want to look at.
Yes,
that's one suggestion that comes right away.
Yeah. I was thinking, did they really want to come to IIM?
Oh, okay.
Was it really that I wanted to come to IIM?
Or was it a prestige?
Or somebody they said that you have to go there. You have to make it there. Otherwise, you don't.
But that also begs the question, do we do everything because we want to do, or we get there and we figure it out? Like, I didn't know how to be a social scientist, but I had a vague idea that I will not fail. That's all I had a vague idea about. And then I went and I figured it out. So that could also be happening. Yeah. Be some places. I would want to be an artist or a swimmer. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Right.
Then I felt like an imposter.
Yeah.
So that added to.
And my larger question, based on what you said, is what's wrong with a scientist also being a good dancer? Why do these identities have to clash? Why can't a scientist be an awesome cook or a stand-up comedian?
And also the thing you said, the way people dress.
Yes. Yeah.
There's one more.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to add about things that happen in PhD is when our experiments don't work, like when others' experiments are working, like
failure.
How much smart or whatever you are, we tend to think like, you know, maybe I'm not good enough, it's just not going to happen with me. And like even when people walk to us and say that you're smart, you just feel bad. and you think that you're not good enough, that's why your experiments are not working. And sometimes even like some professors do not tend to understand that's not the case, and they don't help them with that.
I'll give you a tip. When that happens, talk to a peer about how many times they have failed, because typically we don't talk about our insecurities, but if everyone in this room started talking about the number of times they have tried and didn't get there, certainly that fear of failure will be very normalized. And failure is a very big component of scientific research. People do things, it doesn't work out. They do things. Failure doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means the step did not work.
Yeah, I understand, like how to convince that it's not the experiment, like it's not our fault, but it's the experiment.
Convince whom? Convince to you?
Yeah, ourselves.
So that is what is most important. You have to convince yourself. That is what I'm saying, that build a community where these conversations are normalized. When you see that all your peers are actually struggling and failing in certain things, you won't feel that bad.
Any other questions? Yeah, one question from the right at the back. I'd just like to add on that, when you were talking about failures.
Yeah.
So Edison also failed many times, right, to invent that bulb. So then people ask him that you are not a genius, you failed so many times. Then he said, I know so many different ways not to invent the bulb, but something else.
Yeah.
So failure is just like a stepping stone to, it's a discovery. Yeah. And since all are living the life, it is the journey basically.
Yeah.
So at this moment of time, if I don't get into IIT, I might consider myself failed. But 5 years later, if I look back at myself and I see that it was foolish of me, that means you have actually grown up.
Yeah.
So that means it's a journey.
Right.
So the definition of failure is like multifaceted, that once it is in learning, and second is it is a temporary phase where you go somewhere else.
And it's also very socially constructed. I mean, people say Einstein is slow.
So that means it's not a competition per se.
No.
It is as your results are not coming or something else, that you need to be motivated on what your hypothesis is, what your claim is, and relentlessly work on that claim.
Absolutely.
So that is what I think. So no questions, just like just want to know this view from you.
So thank you for sharing. I completely agree with you. In fact, if any of you write a CV of failures, please share it with me. I would love to see how creatively you put everything that you have done where someone has not acknowledged it. It's more like a outside validation, right? So it may really not be a failure that you are thinking about.
Any of your studies relating depression with imposter syndrome? Like when you are depressed, then these thoughts come, like whatever you are, wherever you are, you don't belong here.
Yeah.
Like whatever you are doing, it is not right. But when you are depressed, but when you are out of the depression, like, I don't think these thoughts may come.
Right.
So then are you like relating these two things together? Or?
I'm not, because of my training. Again, I'm an education trained person. I'm not the one to diagnose depression. And the way we use the term depression very loosely, clinical depression is very different from the way we use it in everyday language. That, what we mean is someone feeling sad. Sadness and depression are not the same, which is why I haven't delved into that territory, because I'm not the expert to do it. Yeah. One last question maybe? Yeah.
I read this book, The Denial of Death.
Okay.
So he says that man is afraid to die without significance. So there's a universal urge to heroism. So after till you're 20 or 18, you're under your parents, you feel significant under them. And when you come to college, and into IIC, like you are no more significant. Earlier you were at the topper of the school, but isn't that the significance from the real thing?
I agree. I haven't. I haven't read the book, but just say your question once again. I got it, but
so till 18, I was under my parents. They care about me. They love me. The significance is higher. Also, my school, I'm the topper. So finally, you come to IIC, you are no more the topper. So you don't feel significant. So the idea is, because of man always used to deny his death by doing something heroic act.
Yeah.
Here you when you compare with your friends, you don't feel significant.
Possibly that could be one, but not the only thing that could be happening. I mean, there are many people whose parents actually don't make them feel significant, right? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deva.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thing from here. So,
Thank you.
so remember us by.